I'm Pete Aitken. I'm the head of customer strategy at Kantar. And for those of you who don't know who Kantar are and what we do, we help our clients understand how people perceive them and guide where to invest for growth, whether that's in marketing, sales, or customer experience. And over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to go through some really recent, really juicy data and 3 examples that will bring it to life. And the thing that I want to bring to life is this really big challenge that many of our clients come to us with, which is the role of customer experience in driving long-term growth. So in the world of brand measurement, our work has repeatedly proven that strong brands influence both revenues by helping a brand to be chosen more often and profits in influencing the price that customers are willing to pay. And now we can understand how individual marketing activity contributes to this. But in customer experience, the biggest leap has really been in this ability to understand in real time what customers are saying and put that into the hands of frontline and design staff. But the focus here is often really short term. It's often very operational. And it often needs a specific CX team to manage this data, and they often sit in an operational corner of the business tasked with managing the metrics. And so a big challenge that we have here is this gap we need to bridge, the gap between advertising and technology, between strategy and operations. And this is the issue at the heart of this. Brand measurement is highly strategic. It's focused on future value. Experience measurement is fantastic for identifying fixes, improvements, and possible points of friction and innovation. And certainly the impact on business outcomes can be tremendous. But it's difficult to know how all of this great work that happens in customer experience rolls up to impacting on the brand as a whole. And also, we don't have consistency in the metrics. They're not always that helpful in understanding this. We end up in a world where we put NPS on the board-level scorecard and then try and capture likelihood to recommend after every single innocuous interaction, the ATM and a random transaction. And then the leadership team, I don't know if you've ever experienced this in the room, but the leadership team will then come and kick you when your NPS score goes down, even though it's driven by external factors around the brand. And so our clients are starting to recognize this as well, and they're coming to us with increasingly sophisticated questions. So, what attributes of our experience most contribute to brand power? How do we measure brand and experience consistently? How do we translate our brand positioning into our digital and our physical experiences? And if we've got an e-com store, how can that be not just a conversion driver, but also a place that builds the brand? And so to understand how to address this, firstly, we need to understand what builds a strong brand. And our research over the last 50 years demonstrates that it's 3 things. Number 1, strong brands are meaningful. They meet functional and emotional needs. 2, they're different, so they stand out and they lead the way. And 3rd, they're salient, so they come to mind quickly at the next point of purchase. And our work, we have the only approach to evaluating brand growth that's been independently approved by the Marketing Accountability Standards Board, and our work demonstrates that over time, brands that are particularly meaningful, different, and salient grow more than those that don't. Over a 5-year period, a highly meaningfully different salient brand will grow 253%. That's 5 times more than those who don't have this, who are in the low camp. So being more meaningful and more different from the competition, this means you're more likely to be chosen and customers are more willing to pay for the services that you offer. But when we look at these factors, they're relevant not just for marketers, they're also customer experience metrics. Meaningful, being effective, being easy, creating a sense of trust, building a connection with your customers, functional and emotional needs. Being different, standing out from the competition. Being salient, creating memories that come back. These could be metrics in a CX program. More on that a little bit later. And so what builds a brand then? Well, a brand is really everything that comes to mind when we think about a company, aided by distinctive assets such as logos and colors. And we often think of brand building activity as advertising and paid media. And as Nikki showed, this is fantastic and particularly powerful in the short term. But yet, the total perceptions of the brand, only 1/4 of it is built by paid media, 7% of which is TV advertising, which leaves 75% to be created by everything else. And a huge part of this are the product, the sales, and the service experiences. For example, in financial services, just under 60% of total brand predisposition is created by the experience. And this chart here shows in purple all the experience touch points and in white all the exposure touch points. And if we look at all of these, we can put them in order of their contribution to brand. And the number one factor in financial services contributing to the brand is the app. So a point here to raise how we calculate this. We calculate this based on the reach of the touch point, how many people encounter it, but also the impact of that touch point, so how much it's associated with growth. So if you think about the app, you're using it maybe every day, its functionality, its imagery, its wording, its content, all that is having a drip, drip, drip impact on how you think about the bank. And in the rest of the top 5, we've got TV advertising, the brand website, social media, the branch. All these things are brand builders. They're not just cost centers, they're also having a commercial impact in the long term. And then in the rest of the top 20, we've got a whole series of other things with emails and newsletters down here accounting for about 2%. So first, all these touch points, they need to work together to create a clear, consistent picture of the brand in customers' minds. But also, this poses quite a challenging question, I think, for brand building and for the CEO ultimately, because you can have the most amazing TV ad campaign, but if your contact center experience or your app is rubbish and people are complaining about you, then over time this is going to have a really detrimental impact on other people's likelihood to choose because the word gets around. And if you've got a dreadful experience, it's going to have a damaging impact on your brand. And so it poses the question, if you're going to spend 30 to 40 million pounds on a TV advertising campaign, why not invest that in your experience? So given that strong brands drive commercial performance and the outsized role that experience plays in brand building, it shouldn't be surprising that companies who improve their experience over time are 2.5 times more likely to increase their market share. And so we analyzed this. This is based on some analysis that we've got via a data set called BrandZ. And BrandZ is the biggest collection of customer perceptions of brands that exist in the world. It's based on about 4.5 million customer interviews. We've got about 20,000 brands across about 50 markets. So we can do this incredible longitudinal analysis. And this was based on some analysis that looked over a 2-year period with 10,000 brands. Those that improved their experience performance were 2.5 times more likely to grow market share. And meaningful and difference are critical to driving this growth. This chart shows that for brands who have excess meaningfulness, difference, and salience, the incremental chance of growing in the next year. But what we also find is that over-indexing on difference, performing in the top third, leads to a far greater likelihood to grow. So we've been working with Oxford Business School for the past few years, and they've demonstrated most recently that difference was the #1 predictor of share price outperformance, and it's the single biggest factor. It explains just over a third of overall variance. So delivering on your difference through your experiences, this is what makes the difference in building your brand. And so we recommend that customer experience studies don't just evaluate satisfaction in delivering on customer needs, they also evaluate the extent that these experiences contribute to the sense that the brand is different. And now I'm going to bring this to life with 3 examples. I'd like to start with Aldi, who are a great illustration of this. So Aldi's a brand that has successfully grown from marginal to mainstream over the past 15 years, and they're now the 4th largest supermarket in the UK. But it's been a long journey. Back in 2011, they were had a fairly narrow offering. They were not particularly differentiated from their competition. But then over the past 10 years, they did something really exciting. Firstly, they expanded their offering with a focus on quality and value, but also on really talkable offerings. So the middle aisle, where you could go and get camping and gardening equipment. Just a couple of weeks ago, I got a bench grinder for my father-in-law, 20 quid, brilliant. So these kinds of things are things that people talk about and get more people into the store. But then since the cost of living crisis, they've really stepped it up again. So they demonstrated that they can be the go-to supermarket for both value, taking market share from value-oriented competition like Asda and Tesco, but also they've expanded their store footprint, so they're now just a more convenient place to go. They're much more meaningful. I'm sure in the audience there's many committed Waitrose customers who actually now think, oh, Aldi, it's all right. And so what they've done over this time is they've become more meaningful and more different to more people. And now I want to talk about financial services. So let's face it, banking is a little bit boring. I mean, not for me, I mean, I love banking, but most banking providers, they're very meaningful. They deliver on functional and emotional needs very well, a wide range of products and services. You can get support in the branch, support in the contact center. But the fintechs, however, they've really set themselves apart from the rest. They have clearly been very successful in differentiating with a digital-first experience. But is that really enough to grow like we saw with Aldi? Well, it certainly worked in the short term. I looked at data from 2020 to 2024. I took this cut. This is a cut from May in 24, which looks at current users of Monzo and Revolut compared to two of the established banks. And we can see that their excess difference has certainly driven a significant growth in the last 2 years. And so it's so easy to open a current account with these providers that many customers have thought, well, why not? And that's exactly what seems to be happening. We analyze search data for how people think about these brands, and what we can see is that people discover Monzo when they're going on holiday, Revolut's associated with crypto trading, Chase had a really good 5.1% interest rate that was endorsed by Martin Lewis, and Starling is very well known for business banking. So what happens is people open these accounts to deliver on specific needs or to try out their services, and these products are often added alongside a wallet of traditional banking players. So now I want to ask you, what happens if you add a Monzo into your wallet of traditional banking players? How does it make you feel about your old bank? So first, we can ask customers who only bank with traditional players, we can ask them the extent that of those they prefer their main bank. And about 54% of people would say that they very or extremely strongly prefer their traditional main bank. So why? Why would a fintech increase the preference for a traditional bank? So we found this out over a couple of years, found out in 2022, again in 2023, and we didn't really believe it at the first time in 2022, but this year we've actually taken a bit of time to explore why. And the answer is really two quite simple things. The first is really, what do people want from a banking provider? Well, since time immemorial, it has been the everyday things, having good online and on mobile service, having well-designed products, caring for your customers, building trust. And sure, being trending and having great advertising is important, but it's the basics that really matter. And we can also look at how brands perform against these factors. And what we see for the top 5 brands against everyday needs, the established banks. In terms of being caring and responsible, again, it's the established banks. And sure, the fintechs are seen as trending and having a very distinctive look and feel. But the further challenge they have is that it's the established banks that are better at getting their messages out to the masses. Customers across all age ranges and across all backgrounds, it's the established banks that deliver on the things that matter, and they're often the go-to choice. So as a result, they create a much deeper level of attachment. And now the second issue is around usage and which banks you use most often. So if you've got multiple banks in your wallet, think about which is the one that you use most often. So I'd love for you to think about in the room how many of you got a Monzo or a Revolut when you're going on holiday, and it's become the bank that you use most often. I would wager not that many. And this really matters because all of that drip, drip, drip of interaction, the customer experience that you're having, primarily with your established banks, this is continually reinforcing those banks in your minds. And so over the last year, what we've seen is a slow erosion in the perception of difference among the fintechs. And perhaps this is due to the increase in need for the reassurance of a branch or contact center or advice. And that would kind of play out as a fairly reasonable explanation because we've also seen a commensurate increase in the perception of difference for the established banks. So maybe the novelty is wearing off, maybe the perception of what is a differentiator has really shifted. But I think in a world of a digital-first offering, what we've seen is that the established banks have demonstrated that actually, you know what? They can offer that pretty well, just as well as well. But one brand is ahead of everyone, and that brand is Nationwide. And they embody everything that a fintech is not. So based on our brand benchmarks, they're seen as number 1 for trust, number 1 for pride in their customers, number 1 for honesty, and they've really stepped things up over the last 18 months. They've done their Fairer Share program twice. They rebranded with the Dominic West ad campaign and their branch promise. And so this has landed really well with particularly older customers, 35 plus, but they're an incredibly large and incredibly valuable group of people. But what they've also done is they found really practical ways to build their perception of being of membership and of being a building society and a mutual. They've effectively linked that with their customer experience and real things that bring that to life for customers. So they've demonstrated they can offer something that no one else does. And when your customers feel that your brand is different, they're less likely to leave, and they're more likely to recommend you to others. Because if customers feel that they're getting something from your brand that they can't get from anywhere else, why leave? And this has also driven significant growth. So they've now got a level of current usage that is still ahead of the fintechs, unlike many of the other established banks. And at the same time, they've grown by 450,000 committed members. These are people who've got a current account plus a savings or a mortgage or a loan. So these are much more valuable customers. And so when we think about what drives growth, sure, a frictionless experience is important, but it's very copyable. The market can catch up. And standing out, being distinctive, creating a sense of novelty, that's important because it gets you more recognized, creates a sense of buzz. But banks that are central to customers' lives, they go beyond this. They cultivate both a perceived level of difference, but on the things that really matter to customers. They're both different and they're meaningful. And so reinforcing this across as many exposures and experiences as possible, this has created a much deeper level of emotive differentiation, and that remains in the memory for much longer. And I've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to give one more example. This is the energy market. Now, Ofgem very helpfully provides us with market share data across the suppliers. And since arriving on the scene in 2019, Octopus have delivered consistent organic and inorganic growth. So they now have the largest market share, overtaking British Gas, and they're the recipient of many customers who leave from other providers. And we explored a number of factors that might drive this. We looked at NPS, we looked at overall brand perceptions, but by far the biggest predictor was the customer perception of difference. And it explained 82% of overall variance of organic growth between 2022 and 2023. Because your customers are the real test of whether your brand is both delivering on their needs and they're doing it in a way that they perceive that nobody else can. And if you're doing this, they're much more likely to advocate for you over the dinner table, which is going to increase your Trustpilot scores and your Which scores, and it's going to drive further acquisition. So the killer question here is, does your experience make your brand feel different? And this is the question I think people should start thinking about adding in transactional CX programs, measuring after journeys and touch points. And when we think about experiences and brand, we see everything rolling up together, from the individual touch points to the journeys, the relationships. All of this rolls up together, and we see meaningful and difference as a consistent metric that you can apply from a brand level right down into your transactions. And certainly we want to understand how your touch points need to be improved. But also, if you can understand it in the same way, you can understand how individual touch points all contribute to the brand and therefore the commercial brand value of the organization. And we feel that that is a much more sensible way of understanding the long-term ROI of your customer experience investments, their impact on the commercial brand value. And so now we've embedded this approach across all our work, helping our clients benchmark themselves across the competition, determine where to invest, understand the ROI of CX, evaluate customer journeys, and also design and implement CX measurement programs. And we're very fortunate that we work with a fantastic set of clients and partners. And many of our clients are recognized as industry leaders in customer experience, and they top the customer experience ranking tables. And it's been great to be part of their success and also win a number of awards with them. But by having a set of clients like that, that's allowed us to innovate in our work in order to better drive their growth. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to join you today. If you want to find out any more, I'll be in the main area where the bar is, where the food was. Please do. You can add me on LinkedIn and get in touch if you want to join us, you want to work with us. I'd be very happy to take an email from you or have a chat and then go from there. So thank you all very much. Thank you all for listening.